My name is Samuel. Most folks just call me Sam. But back then, during the war, I was nothing more than a skinny kid in glasses, wearing a jacket that was 2 sizes too big. Now, sitting here as an old man, I sometimes wonder how I survived it at all, and why I did. I remember the day they gave me my uniform. It didn't fit right. The jacket hung loose on my shoulders, the pants sagged, and my boots rubbed blisters into my feet. I wasn't the picture of a soldier. I wasn't strong or broad. I was thin, bookish, more comfortable with a pen than with a rifle. And yet, war doesn't ask you if you're ready. It drags you in. When I first stood in line at the camp, the air smelled of sweat, smoke, and fear. Men around me were laughing, joking, pretending not to be scared. I tried to laugh too, but my voice cracked. I felt their eyes on me. The frail boy with glasses, wondering if I'd even make it through the first march. That night, lying on the hard cot, I stared at the ceiling and listened. The snores, the coughs, the restless tossing. Somewhere outside, boots crunched on gravel, a whistle blew. My heart pounded in my chest, so loud I thought the others could hear it. I whispered to myself, "Sam, you have to be more than you are now. Tomorrow, you have to become someone else." That was my first night as a soldier, and I swear, it felt like the last night of my boyhood. The morning came cold, and the bugle tore me out of my bunk like thunder. I barely slept the night before, my stomach twisted in knots. But there was no time to think. We were shouted into lines, boots laced, rifles slung across our backs. It was the first march of my life as a soldier. The air was sharp with frost, and our breaths came out in clouds. I remember the sound of dozens of boots striking the ground in rhythm, the bark of the sergeant cutting through the air like a whip. My glasses fogged with every breath, and I had to keep pushing them up my nose with one hand, the other clinging to the strap of my pack. The men around me joked at first, trying to mask the weight pressing down on us. Someone sang half a verse of a song, and for a brief moment, we all laughed. But the miles dragged on, and soon the laughter dried up. My legs burned, my shoulders ached, and blisters grew in my boots until each step felt like walking on fire. One boy beside me, no older than I was, collapsed. He fell face first into the dirt, and the sergeant screamed at him to get up. I'll never forget his face when he tried. Tears streaked with mud, his lips trembling. He stood again, shaking, because he had no choice. That march taught me something I never forgot. The body is weaker than the will. The pain can break you, but only if you let it. They say no man forgets his first battle. They're right. I can still hear it, clearer than any memory I have. The crack of rifles, the thunder of artillery, the screaming of men who just yesterday were laughing beside me. My first battle carved itself into my bones and never left. We had marched for days, mud caked on our boots, rain soaking us to the bone. Then, without warning, the silence broke. Shells whistled above and tore the earth apart. I threw myself flat into the dirt, my heart hammering, glasses slipping from my face. For a moment, all I could see was mud, smoke, and fire. The air stank of gunpowder and burning wood. Men shouted orders, some too far away to hear, others too close to ignore. I remember one young soldier beside me. He couldn't have been more than 18, his hands shaking so bad he could barely hold his rifle. He looked at me, eyes wide with terror, and whispered, "Sam, I don't want to die." I didn't know what to say. I was just as scared. My body trembled, but somehow I raised my rifle and aimed. Not out of courage, but out of instinct, out of fear that if I didn't, I'd never see another sunrise. That day, I learned the truth. War doesn't turn boys into men. It strips them bare, tears away the illusion of invincibility, and leaves only survival. And survival, it comes with a price. They never tell you about the silence. People think war is all noise, guns, bombs, shouting. But what haunts me most is what comes after. When the guns go quiet, when the smoke clears, and you're left with nothing but the sound of your own breath and the groans of the wounded. After that first battle, the ground looked less like earth and more like something torn apart, ripped open by steel and fire. Trees were nothing but blackened sticks. The mud was dark with more than just rain, and helmets lay scattered like broken toys. I remember stepping carefully, afraid to look down, yet unable to look away. My boots sank into the muck, and every step felt heavier. I adjusted my glasses with a trembling hand, trying to focus on the horizon anywhere but the ground. Then I heard it. A voice, weak, rasping. A young man calling for his mother. I froze. He couldn't have been older than me. His hand reached up through the mud, fingers clawing at the air. I knelt beside him, but there was nothing I could do. I held his hand just for a moment until it went still. That night, as we camped in the ruins, I lay awake, staring into the darkness. The faces of the fallen burned in my mind, brighter than any fire. That was the first time I truly understood. War doesn't just kill men. It kills the boy inside you and leaves you with a weight you'll carry for the rest of your days. Out there, between battles, a man clings to little things that remind him he's still human. For me, it was a letter, one letter folded and worn that I kept tucked inside my jacket. My mother's handwriting, her words carried me through the darkest nights. We had been pushed back to a half-ruined village. The walls were pocked with bullet holes, the roofs caved in, and the only sound was the creak of broken shutters in the wind. We slept in what was left of a schoolhouse. Desks shattered, chalk still on the blackboard. That night, while the others mumbled in their sleep, I pulled out that letter. The paper was creased, edges torn from being read so many times. My mother had written simple things about the chickens on the farm, about the weather, about how the apple tree was blooming again. But to me, it was everything. I read it by the dim flame of a candle stub, my glasses slipping low on my nose, my hands trembling from exhaustion. Around me, the men were silent shadows, their faces hollowed by fear and hunger. But for a few minutes, as I traced those words with my eyes, I wasn't in a ruined village. I was home. I was her son again, not just a soldier. When I folded it back and tucked it close to my heart, I whispered a promise. I'll see you again. I'll come home. It was a promise I wasn't sure I could keep, but one I needed to believe in. War teaches you many things, but the greatest lesson is this. You don't fight for flags or medals. You fight for the man beside you, for the brother who shares your hunger, your fear, your silence. Without them, you don't last a day. There was one man I'll never forget, Thomas. Broad-shouldered, quick to smile, a farm boy from the Midwest. He was everything I wasn't. Strong, confident, full of jokes, even in the mud and rain. We met on the march, and by the end of the week, he was the closest thing I had to family. One night, we sat by a smoldering fire in a half-dug trench. Rain pattered on our helmets, and the smoke stung our eyes. Thomas nudged me and said, "Sam, If this damn war doesn't kill us, I'm taking you to my farm. We'll drink whiskey until we forget all this." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. The truth is, he kept me alive. When I stumbled, he pulled me up. When fear froze me, his voice pushed me forward. War stripped away everything else, but it gave me that bond, stronger than blood. Years later, I can still hear his voice in the dark, still see his grin through the smoke. They say soldiers are brothers. I didn't believe it until I met Thomas. There comes a day in every soldier's life when the war takes something you can't get back. For me, it was Thomas, my brother in arms, the man who carried me through the mud and the fear. I can still see that moment as if it happened yesterday. It was dawn. The mist clung low over the battlefield, turning everything into shadows. We were ordered to push forward through a shattered village, rifles raised, hearts pounding. The silence before the storm was worse than any bombardment. Then the shots rang out. Windows flared with muzzle fire, and the street exploded into chaos. We dove for cover, bricks splintering around us. I turned to shout for Thomas and saw him stumble. His face twisted, eyes wide with shock, and he fell hard into the mud. I crawled to him, bullets whining overhead, my glasses cracked from the blast. His hand clutched mine, strong even as his breath grew shallow. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. I whispered to him, "Hold on, brother. Just hold on." But his grip loosened, and I knew. That was the day the war carved a scar into my soul, a scar that no medal, no parade, no prayer could ever heal. The war finally ended, but ending doesn't mean forgetting. When they told us we were going home, my heart should have leapt. Instead, I just sat there staring at my boots, thinking of the men who wouldn't be making the journey back. Still, I boarded that train with the others, my glasses cracked, my jacket worn thin, and my soul heavier than my pack. The countryside rolled past the train window, fields green and whole, untouched by bombs or fire. I pressed my forehead to the glass and wondered how the world could look the same when I felt so different. Each village, each tree felt like a ghost of the life I'd left behind. When I stepped off at my hometown station, the air smelled of fresh bread and earth after rain. People were waving, children running, voices shouting with joy, and yet I felt apart from it, like a shadow among the living. Then I saw her, my mother, standing small among the crowd, her eyes wide behind tears. She rushed to me, and when she wrapped her arms around me for the first time in years, I felt like that boy again. Not a soldier, just her son. But behind the warmth of that embrace was the truth I carried. I had come back, but not all of me had returned. Part of me was still out there in the mud and smoke with Thomas and the others, and that part would never come home. And now, all these years later, I sit here, an old man in a worn jacket, glasses slipping low on my nose. The war is long past, the friends I once marched beside now gone, but their voices still walk beside me. People see me as just a quiet grandfather, but inside me lives a boy who trembled on his first march, a soldier who held his brother's hand in the mud, and a son who once came home to his mother's arms. I rock gently in this chair, listening to the crickets outside, the wooden boards creaking under me. The air smells of fresh grass and distant rain, nothing like the smoke and fire I once breathed. Sometimes, when the wind is just right, I close my eyes and I'm back there, the faces of the boys, their laughter, their fear, their courage. But I don't tell this story to frighten anyone. Number, I tell it because it matters. Because life is fragile and freedom is never free. Because somewhere out there, another boy will put on a jacket too big for his shoulders and wonder if he's strong enough. And I want him to know, strength is not in muscle, but in heart. I look at the sky, painted with the colors of evening, and I smile. Not because the memories are light, they are heavy, but because I carried them, and they carried me. That's all any man can do. When the war ended, people thought we just stepped off the train and picked up life where we had left it. But the truth is, you never come back the same. The war followed us home, in our dreams, in our silences, in the way we looked at the world. I tried to work. I put on clean clothes, found a job in an office downtown. Every morning I polished my shoes, straightened my tie, adjusted my glasses, and walked through the city streets like any other man. But inside, I was still in the mud, still hearing shells whistling above. The nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, my heart racing at sounds no one else could hear. A car backfiring, a door slamming. To me, they were guns, explosions, echoes of a battlefield I thought I'd left behind. People around me didn't understand. They wanted stories of glory, of medals, of victory. But war isn't made of glory. It's made of silence, of fear, of memories that don't fade. I carried those memories in my briefcase like invisible papers, heavy as stone. And yet, each day I survived. Each morning I got up, put on that jacket, and went back into the world. Because surviving was the only way to honor those who never had the chance. They say love saves a man, and maybe that's true. For me, it wasn't medals or parades that pulled me back to life. It was her. The day I met Mary, I stopped feeling like a ghost. I first saw her in a small diner on the corner. She was carrying a tray of coffee cups, moving quickly between tables, but she still had a smile for every man who walked in. The world around me was gray, but she seemed to glow, as if she belonged to a life untouched by war. I was nervous, adjusting my glasses every other minute, my jacket hanging loose on my thin frame. I wasn't much to look at, a soldier who had come home but left his courage behind. Still, when she came to my table, she looked me in the eye and asked softly, "Coffee, sir?" Her voice was warm, kind, like home. I remember stammering, barely able to answer, but she laughed, not unkindly, and for the first time in years, I laughed too. Weeks turned into months. Walks in the park. Letters passed when I was too shy to say what I felt. Slowly, the nightmares grew quieter, and the silence inside me began to lift. With Mary beside me, I wasn't just a soldier anymore. I was a man again. Now I sit here, an old man with thinning hair and glasses that slide too often down my nose, and I see my grandchildren playing in the yard. They run, they laugh, free as the wind, and I thank God they've never known the sound of war. But I also know they must understand what it cost. When they ask me, "Grandpa, what was the war like?" I don't tell them about medals or battles won. I tell them about the march, about the mud, about holding a friend's hand as the world fell apart. I tell them about the silence that follows gunfire, about the letter from my mother that smelled faintly of home, about the smile of a woman who brought me back to life. And then I tell them this: strength isn't about how much weight you can lift or how loud you can shout. Strength is in carrying the things that try to break you and still finding a way to keep walking. They listen, sometimes with wide eyes, sometimes with confusion. They don't yet know the weight of those words, but one day they will. Until then, I sit here, glasses fogged in the evening light, and smile. Because my story is no longer just mine. It lives on in them. And maybe that's all any man can hope for.